A typical brake pad consists of a metal plate with friction material layered on top. When we apply the brake, this material touches the disc plate to stop the wheel from turning, right? So over time, obviously this material thickness will be reduced due to uses, right? But the question is, when should we replace it? Simple. If the friction material on the plate is 1.5 mm or less than that, it's time to replace the pads. But since removing the pads for measurement isn't practical in real time, here is a simple trick. Use a 2 rupee coin as a reference. I mean, if the remaining friction material on the metal plate is just a little thicker than a coin, it's the time for replacement. Changing disc brake pads is one of the easiest maintenance tasks that you can perform on most bikes, and it hardly takes a few minutes. However, while the basic steps are generally similar across various bikes, the exact process can vary depending on the brake system's design. I mean, factors like the type of caliper, the number of caliper pistons, the mounting style, even the additional features like ABS, all this can influence the procedure. For instance, some bikes require removing a sliding pin to release the brake pads. But for some bikes, they use some spring-loaded mechanism or specialized anti-rattle clips. Well, these terms might sound a bit complicated, but trust me, it's really a simple task. Anyway, in today's video from our Classic series, we will be focusing on replacing the rear disc brake pads of a Royal Enfield Classic. A screwdriver and a soft cloth. Keep the bike on the center stand. Locate the rear brake caliper, and this is the component that holds the brake pads and squeezes them against the disc to create braking force. Remove the R clips from the retaining pin. Use a screwdriver so that it will be easy to pull out these clips. Remove the retaining pin. Is it stuck? If yes, place a screwdriver on the end of the pin and tap it lightly. Slide out the old brake pads. Once the retaining pin is removed, gently slide the old brake pads out from the caliper. If the pads are stuck, wiggle the caliper slightly. You can also use a screwdriver to wiggle it. Do not press the brake lever after removing the brake pads at any cost. Why shouldn't we press the brake lever without the brake pads? Well, if you press the brake lever without the brake pads, the caliper piston extends fully, leaving no space for us to push it back. Actually, still there are ways to push it back. But why press the brake lever unnecessarily? Right? As for why we need to push the piston back, you will get to know in a moment. By the way, if this sounds confusing, don't worry at all. We will cover in the video about how the brake caliper works. For now, just remember, do not press the brake lever without the brake pads installed. Push the caliper piston back into its housing. To fit the new brake pads, the caliper piston must be pushed back to create enough space for the new brake pads. Place an old brake pad or a soft material between the piston and the disc. Then push the caliper gently. Not moving back? Then wrap a screwdriver with a soft cloth and use it to push the piston back. This cloth we are using to not to damage the disc or the piston or any of the caliper components. Still not moving? Loosen the brake fluid reservoir cap to reduce the hydraulic pressure. Do not completely remove the cap, as brake fluid is highly sensitive to dust and the moisture, and those particles can create braking issues. Push the piston back until we get the needed space for the new brake pads. Tighten the fluid reservoir cap once the piston is retracted. Why do we need to push the piston back? I know your question. When we can remove the brake pads, why can't we push the new brake pads back? Because new brake pads are thicker than the old ones, right? Obviously, the material on the brake pads becomes thin over the time, just like our slippers, right? So the piston must move back to create some space for the thicker pads, right? Place the right hand side brake pad first. This pad is installed first to lock it with the retaining pin. As the retaining pin's entry point is on this side, it's better to slide it first and lock it. Ensure the pad sits correctly in its position. Now slide the piston sides pad into its place. And ensure the pad sits correctly in its position. Now insert the retaining pin fully. Reattach the R clips to secure the pin in place. Ensure the clips are properly locked. After installation, pump the brake lever several times to reset the piston and ensure the brake pads are correctly seated against the disc.